Hey guys, welcome to episode one. This is going to be our first true episode. I still haven't decided on quite the format for this show, but I figure at some point we're going to get pretty complex, and we're going to have some buzzword bingo here. And so I figure I'll just start things off very basic with some terms that you'll hear a lot, and we'll kind of go from there. So basically, so a server. So basically, a server is just a computer, really. And when you think of servers in the sense of things that are in data centers that big companies use, they're really just PCs, like a desktop that you'd have in your house on steroids, right? So whereas your typical home PC may have a single processor that can run about four simultaneous tasks, a high-powered server can probably do 32 or 64 tasks and has tons and tons of memory and super fast hard drives and things of the sort. But at the end of the day, even something as small as a laptop can be a server, right? The term server is a very general term, especially when we talk about, especially when speaking about network services, right? So the term is very interchangeable, but in general, a server is really just a computer that provides or serves a network service, right? So DNS, DHCP, a web server, or you actually interact with servers even in your home or small business environment all the time. You connect to your Wi-Fi when you get into your house or your business, right? And you get onto the internet. Well, as part of that process, you get an IP address, a net mask, and a gateway, which are provided to your phone or your laptop, that basically tells that device how to communicate with all the devices on that network, and also how to get outside of that network, i.e., the internet, when need be, right? In which case, what we're talking about there is a DHCP server. And yes, a little blue box that you sits in the corner of your house or your office that provides you internet. Yep, that has a server. In fact, that has about 3 servers running in there. It has a DHCP server. It has a DNS server, which basically is a kind of, think of DNS as an address book. Computers on the internet, or just computers in general, know each other or talk to other network devices on IP addresses. Right? IP addresses are just a string of numbers, and it's just a lot easier for us as humans to associate Google.com with Google's website versus 74 dot whatever Google's IP address is, and that clearly I have memorized that, and that actually will change, especially in the case of Google, for a few reasons. One, Google does something called round robin, meaning that they have about 4 or 5 IP addresses that actually point to Google, or that Google.com points to in a given geographic area, meaning that your IP addresses that you would see for Google.com in New York would be different than you would see in California or Hong Kong. And the purpose of that just being latency. You always want to point to the closer servers. So a switch really just connects networks. Just think of it that way. Connects local networks. So you have a printer, you have your laptop, you have your iPhone, some iPads, and you want to do things like, hey, you want to print a document from your laptop to a printer that's across the room that is not even connected physically to your computer. Well, how do you get that? Well, you go through a switch. Now, again, that same typically cheap blue box router that you get from Best Buy also contains a switch. That's where you have those four or five ports are grouped together. That's also part of a switch. Also, on top of that, there's the wireless network is also hardwired. Just using on the circuit board basically gives you another, like a 4th or 5th port, except that one's wireless, I should say. So what's a LAN? A LAN is just like I said, just a group of computers generally within the same network, right? So again, in your office, like uh, every computer, laptop, every desktop, laptop, phone, tablet, anything that you typically have in a small business or in a home environment, those make up a LAN, right? So a WAN is the simplest way to think of a WAN is just a group of LANs. It stands for Wide Area Network. The biggest example of a wide area network would be the internet, right? Your network in your house is local to your house, right? The Google's network is local to Google, and somewhere in between there, you connect, right? You using a WAN. Now, I'm overly simplifying the explanation of a WAN because I'm trying to keep these topics approachable to the typical non-techie uh, or not overly techie business owners or people who are interested in these topics. Um, so if I get too simple for people who know some of this stuff, I apologize. Also, if you guys want more in-depth explanation of certain topics, be sure to let me know. What's a router? A router typically connects more than one LANs, or actually, you can also, in a broader sense, connects multiple LANs or connect WANs, right? You can have a router that will connect your 192.168.1.0 network in your house to your 192.168.2.0 network in your basement, right? If that's your home office or or something similar. Again, overly simplified, but just think of a router as a way to connect two or more networks, right? Including as big as the internet. Virtual machines. A virtual machine is just really it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a software-based computer, right? So, in preparation for this, I kind of had pencil going. Let me see if I can come up with something here that will make sense for you. Okay, let's try this. So here we have a typical computer, right? This is your hardware, right? Inside here you'll have a CPU and memory. You'll have a hard drive. And, things that you find in a typical computer, any computer, laptop, desktop, you name it. Right. So now what a virtual machine is essentially the same thing, except it's entirely a software construct, right? So you typically have something called a hypervisor that will sit on top of your hardware. Think of the hypervisor as like as an operating system, just like Windows or Mac, except it just provides a thin layer. Well, this is not a good. Provides a thin layer, or a very thin abstraction layer that your virtual machine can sit on, right? So you call it a hypervisor. And basically, its job is it controls access, the virtual machine's access to the physical hardware. So on top of your hypervisor is where you're going to sit your VMs, right? So you can, and there's no real limit to how many VMs you can run on a physical machine or physical hypervisor. It's based off of resources because all these resources are shared, right? So this is VM1, VM2, VM3. And just to show you, it's just an entirely logical construct. VM1 can be running Windows. VM2 can be running Linux. Oops. Back. Son of a. Kind of hard to think and type sometimes. And this could be, say, Mac. right? So, and all these are just going to be running at the same time on this machine, and this physical machine, it will provide services, right? So it'll provide some processor time and memory and hard drive space, all these individual computers that are running on top of it. The hypervisor's job is to coordinate all of that. Um, basically, basically, the hypervisor layer makes sure that if this virtual machine needs some more memory and or some more processing time, it'll schedule that with the physical CPU and memory on the physical host, and vice versa for all the other virtual machines. Um, Now, hypervisor is an entirely it's a bit of a separate topic because there are different type of hypervisors. Um, some of them are free and cheap, and you can download them on the internet free of charge. Like a popular one is VirtualBox. And then the more mainstream VM virtualization stacks like VMware, which is very popular in enterprise. And then there's KVM. Um, but basically they all function this way. So going back to our presentation here, what do we got? So just to kind of help solidify some of the topics, I found some pictures on the internet. So this is just an HP DL20 server that I just happened to find a picture on Google doing an image search. Now, if you look at this, I mean, it has all the, even externally it has parts of a computer, right? So each one of these little doors here is where a hard drive goes. Again, it's a computer on steroids. Typically, servers have more than one hard drive because they need to be what you call highly available. So if one of these drives fail, the server doesn't go down, right? And that's just kind of the idea. Now, there's no hard fast rule that says a server has to have multiple hard drives. In fact, there are plenty of servers that don't have multiple hard drives. A lot of Google and Facebook servers, they're they're highly customized servers that run off a single hard drive, because at that scale, these guys operate such huge infrastructure that losing one server doesn't really impact them. Their infrastructure just automatically heals. In other words, if you're running part of Google.com on server A and B, and you have server C as a spare, if server A dies for whatever reason, then their network automatically figures this out and puts server C into production. When you get to that scale, you do a lot of automating. I don't know numbers because Google and Facebook don't make these numbers public, but it's safe to assume that these guys operate somewhere around 100,000 plus servers. Last I heard, there's about 10,000 servers for every engineer that work at Google or Facebook. So just give you an idea how big these guys are. These are switches. Again, they're more or less the same switches. I just gave you a stack with different models just to show you there are also different connectivity options. So this is your typical RJ45 that you'll find in the back of your computer. This little square connector here is called a QSFP Plus. It gives you 10 gig of connectivity. Basically, one of these square connectors will give you as much bandwidth as 10 of these. And this little more rectangular port is called a QSFP. And a QSFP is about 40 gigabits worth of bandwidth. So one of these QSFPs is equal to 4 of these SFP pluses. Now, QSFP also comes in a higher speed, which is the 100 gigabit format, but it's not quite commonplace yet because the technology is very expensive. So the largest companies who really need that kind of bandwidth will spend the money on the 100 gigabit networks, but mostly you'll find 40 gig. You'll find a few 40 gigs, and more common, you'll find 10 gigabit networks. In fact, the prices on 10 gigabit networking is come down so much that it's actually achievable by consumers. They're freelance video editors that will have 10 gigabit ports on their editing computers that they connect to network storage. The idea there, and they'll actually bond them together, right? So you have you take two physical 10 gigabit ports and you logically aggregate them together, giving you 20 gigabits worth of bandwidth. And the idea there is that they keep all their footage on highly redundant and super fast storage that's not local to their computer. In other words, if their computer dies, gets a virus, whatever the case may be, their footage doesn't get lost, right? It's backed up. Typically, you'll have 3 or 4 drives and inside this network appliance, and that footage will typically be copied 2 to 3 times on different drives. Again, the idea being that you can lose a drive and not lose any data. And this is a router. I mean, everyone's seen these in in Best Buy, right? But this is what most people think of when they think of routers. This is what I think of, or most IT professionals think of when they think of routers. This is an older Cisco 2800 series, and these are typically what you'd find these are what we call big iron routers. You will find these in the biggest data centers, especially carrier data centers, right? So think of your ISP or your cell phone carrier, AT&T or Time Warner, Comcast. They move so much bandwidth that they will have banks of these, and each one of these cubes here is an individual router, and each one of them is probably capable of moving close to a petabit worth of data per second, and possibly even close to 40 petabits of data per second. And they'll typically have 4 or 5 of these. Now, these things are extremely expensive. Fully loaded, they probably cost about $2 to $3 million each, and they consume vast amounts of power. So again, only the largest operations who need this kind of raw throughput would even consider spending the money on something like this. And last but not least, these are firewalls. Now I know I kind of skipped my the last bullet point on that slide, but think of a firewall as the gatekeeper. The firewall controls what goes in and out of your network, and these operate very similar to the firewall that you get on a Windows computer, except these are, even this little old 5505 is probably 10, 15 times faster because it's hardware based. In other words, the hardware in it is built specifically for accepting traffic, inspecting it, matching it against rules, and either dropping it or forwarding it. So I guess one more quick demo here. I'll show you a typical layout of how a network would typically be. Now, I'm not going to get into high availability and redundancy and things of that sort. Those are topics that we can hit on a later day, or a later episode, I should say. So typically, you'll have something like this, right? This little oval guy here will say be the internet, or yeah, let's call this the internet. Actually, no. We're just gonna keep it pretty simple. No, I'm wrong. Sorry. Internet. And typically you'll have a router that sits right at the edge. We call this the edge here, where it basically meets the internet. And behind that, and I'm sorry I don't have better stencils to show this. I've been looking at Pencil, and Pencil doesn't seem to have good network stencils, but I'm going to try to find something a little bit better. So you'll have a firewall. And then behind that, you will typically have, you can have another router if you chose to, but just for the sake of simplicity, you'd have your switch. And then behind that, I'll choose something a different one. You'll have your computers. and this will call it the server. So typically the way the flow works is you go and I'm trying to make this the quickest possible to get this information in more bite-sized chunks. A lot of tech is not sexy. A lot of it's extremely boring, to be honest with you. But a lot of it's also extremely important, especially if you want to operate your own network, especially for business, where you just don't want to do things incorrectly. So this is typically what you find with that. And the way it works is, I really like it. But internet traffic come in here. So internet traffic comes in here. The router, will look at it and say, oh, it's for a network that I know about, which is everything that you got here. And he'll say, okay, I know this network, so out this interface, let me pass this down to the firewall. So the firewall has something called ACL. Right? Typically an ACL will say something like, for we'll say let's see if I can make it really simple. Well, typically decide basically an ACL is a set of rules. So let's say something like any traffic coming from this interface, it's called the soft interface, going off the internet can pass, right? And it has a concept of something called a session. So when you start, say, a web session on Google's website, right? You go to google.com. That traffic goes out your computer through the switch to the firewall, where the firewall inspects the traffic and it's like, oh, there's a match. So anything from the LAN going out to the WAN can pass, right? So it'll go out to the router. The router will say, oh, I know how to get to the internet, and it'll pass it to your ISP, blah, 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 just to you. Now, in the meantime, when that traffic goes out the firewall, out the WAN interface, or what's called the northbound interface, it's kind of the north-south interface, it's an entry called basically session before statement saying that it sets this traffic from out the north interface and it's section return. This is why when you go to google.com, the traffic comes back. Now, on the flip side, everything inside of here is protected. Actually, let's see real quick. Everything here is protected. You can do some filtering on even at the router level, saying that certain networks aren't allowed to come into your network. So really where the router work is from is at the firewall. So unless you specifically say that this website running on this server is supposed to be another here, any traffic that comes to this server will get blocked here at the firewall because unless you really allow that traffic. There was no state in the table. There's no existing session, so the firewall blocked. I got a little bit more that I wanted to get into, but I hope I've not lost you guys. But here is the stuff that I'm creating, which is the project that I was running here, and I don't know if it helps. But I will try to make these notes further. to try to go along with each episode. But anyway, that's all for now. See you guys next time.